The Galactic Combat Institute wasn't just prestigious. It was the kind of place where legends came to prove they weren't flukes, where warriors who'd conquered entire star systems came to test themselves against the absolute best the galaxy had to offer. Nestled on the volcanic world of Ixmorath, the Institute's obsidian towers rose like blackened teeth against a crimson sky. And if you squinted hard enough, you could almost convince yourself they weren't designed to be intimidating. You'd be lying, of course, but points for optimism. The orientation hall could have comfortably housed a small starship, which made sense, considering some of the students were roughly the size of small starships. Crystalline Orthvec warriors refracted the dim lighting into rainbow cascades across the walls. Ulketh fighters, reptilian and massive, their scales gleaming like polished armor, clustered in groups of 3 or 4, comparing battle scars and kill counts. The insectoid Fexmora stood on multiple legs, their compound eyes tracking everything simultaneously, mandibles clicking in conversations that sounded like 1,000 knives being sharpened at once. And then there was Kess, 5'4", maybe 130 pounds if she'd had a big lunch, standing in the center of that hall of giants like a house cat who'd wandered into a den of tigers and hadn't yet realized her mistake. Except, and this is important, she had absolutely realized. She just didn't care. "Is that?" Huxmal's voice rumbled like distant thunder as he stared down at the human who'd just been assigned as his roommate. The Ulketh warrior stood over 9 feet tall, his emerald scales catching the light as his tail swished in what might have been confusion or amusement. Hard to tell with reptilian body language. "Is that a juvenile? Did they send me someone's hatchling by mistake?" Kess looked up, way up, and smiled. Not a nervous smile, not an intimidated smile. The kind of smile that made Huxmal's inner eyelids flicker just once, some ancient prey instinct firing in the back of his brain before his conscious mind dismissed it as ridiculous. "I'm 28, Kess said, her voice carrying that particular brand of calm that either meant supreme confidence or complete delusion. "And no, there's been no mistake." 28 what? Months? This from a female Orthvec nearby, her crystalline form chiming like wind through glass as she laughed. The sound was actually quite beautiful, which somehow made it worse. "Surely there's been an error in the registration. Humans are new to the galactic community. Perhaps your species uses different measurement systems?" "Oh, I'm measured just fine," Kess replied, still smiling. The crowd was gathering now, because nothing attracts warriors quite like the promise of entertainment, and a tiny human at the galaxy's most elite combat academy. That was entertainment with a capital E. Master Instructor Fencor descended from the raised platform with the kind of deliberate grace that came from having 6 legs and absolute confidence in every single one of them. His exoskeleton was marked with etchings that told the story of 500 battles across 100 worlds, and his 4 compound eyes fixed on Kess with an intensity that had made seasoned warriors confess to crimes they hadn't committed. "Human," he said, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that the translation devices rendered as deep skepticism. "I have reviewed the roster 6 times. Your name is listed. However, I must verify, you understand this is the Galactic Combat Institute, not the Galactic Combat Interest Club, not the Galactic Combat Awareness Seminar." "I'm aware," Kess said. "The mortality rate for first rotation students is 12%. "I'm aware of that, too. The injury rate is 93%. "Sounds fun." A ripple of laughter rolled through the hall, and not the friendly kind. The kind that predators make when they spot something small and crunchy wandering into their territory. Lokthar pushed through the crowd because of course he did. The Ulketh prince was everything Huxmal was, but bigger, meaner, and decorated with enough ceremonial bone piercings to stock a primitive jewelry shop. His family ruled 3 systems, and he'd personally led the conquest of 2 of them. He didn't just walk, he strutted, his massive tail carving a path through students who weren't quite quick enough to move. This is the human. Lokthar's laugh sounded like rocks in a garbage disposal. This tiny, soft little thing, Instructor Fencor, with all respect, and I mean this sincerely, has the Institute's standards fallen so low that we're accepting prey species now? What's next? Recruiting the food vendors from the cafeteria. More laughter. Louder this time. Kess just kept smiling. Perhaps, Lokthar continued, warming to his audience now, perhaps this is some kind of joke. A morale exercise? They bring in something small and fragile, and we practice our restraint by not accidentally crushing it during basic drills. Your concern is touching, Kess said, and there was something in her tone, something that made a few of the more perceptive students stop laughing. Really? I'm moved. Moved. Lokthar leaned down, bringing his massive head level with hers. His breath smelled like sulfur and old meat. The only moving you'll do here is out. I give you 3 days before you're crying for transport off-world. 2 days if you're smart enough to recognize how outmatched you are. Interesting bet, Kess replied, her smile never wavering. Want to make it official? The hall went quiet. Not silent. You can't silence 300 apex predators. But quiet enough that everyone could hear Lokthar's rumbling growl. You want to bet against me, human? I want to fight you, Kess said simply. First combat trial tomorrow. You and me, unless you're worried. The explosion of noise that followed was deafening. Roars of approval, clicking mandibles, crystalline chiming that sounded like breaking glass. This was exactly the kind of foolish bravado that got small species killed, and every warrior in the hall knew it. Lokthar's eyes gleamed. Instructor Fencor, permission to accept this challenge? I promise to be gentle. Mostly. Fencor's compound eyes swiveled between Lokthar and Kess, processing, calculating. Finally, his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Permission granted. First match tomorrow. Noon cycle. I'm curious to see how this resolves itself. The betting started immediately. Handheld devices lit up across the hall as students wagered on everything from how long Kess would last, consensus under 90 seconds, to whether she'd actually show up. Odds heavily favored no-show. Sensible human cuts her losses. 500 to 1 against Kess, lasting even a single match. In the back of the hall, a small janitor, some species nobody paid attention to because they weren't warrior class, quietly placed his entire monthly salary on the human. That evening, the training halls were packed with students running drills, practicing techniques, and generally doing what elite warriors do when they're not actively conquering things. The Ulketh favored brutal strength exercises. The Fexmora practiced their lightning-quick strikes against reinforced dummies. The Orthvek meditated while their crystalline forms resonated at frequencies that could shatter bone. Training Hall 5, however, was empty, except for Kess. She moved through forms that were old when most galactic species were still figuring out fire. Movements passed down through generations of humans who'd learned a fundamental truth. When you're small, when you're outweighed, when every physical advantage is stacked against you, you get creative or you get dead. The janitor, making his rounds, paused in the doorway. Watched. His eyes, multiple sets, blinking in sequence, widened as Kess flowed from stance to stance, each transition so smooth it looked choreographed. Except choreography didn't have that kind of intent behind it. He'd seen a lot of fighters in his 30 rotations working at the Institute, watched champions train, observed legends practice. This was different. This was efficiency raised to an art form. Every movement had purpose. No wasted energy. No unnecessary flourish. Just pure, distilled technique that treated the humanoid body as a weapon system that evolution had spent millions of rotations perfecting. The janitor quietly doubled his bet. Kess finished her forms, grabbed a towel, and noticed him watching. "Evening," she said pleasantly. "Evening, human Kess," he replied, his translator rendering his native language into something approximating politeness, with an undercurrent of "holy shit, what did I just witness?" "Big day tomorrow." "Should be interesting," Kess agreed, wiping sweat from her face. "The Prince Lokthar is considered one of the most dangerous students in Institute history." "I know. He has killed opponents in the ring before." "I know that too." The janitor's multiple eyes blinked again, out of sequence this time. "You are either very brave or very foolish." Kess's smile returned, that same unnerving smile that Huxmal had seen earlier. Why not both? She left the training hall humming something the janitor's translator couldn't identify. Some ancient human tune about not worrying, being happy. In the dormitories, Huxmal lay on his oversized bunk and tried to reconcile the tiny human he'd mocked earlier with the strange, nagging feeling that he'd just made a terrible mistake. He'd seen Lokthar fight, had watched the prince tear through opponents like tissue paper. And yet that smile. That absolutely infuriating smile that suggested Kess knew something everyone else didn't. Huxmal's tail twitched anxiously. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting indeed. Morning on Ixmarath arrived with its usual dramatics. Twin suns breaking over the horizon like the universe had ordered a 2-for-1 special on blinding light. The cafeteria, a cavernous space that could seat 1,000 warriors and still have room for their egos, buzzed with an energy that went beyond the usual pre-combat anticipation. Today was special. Today, everyone got to watch the tiny human get absolutely demolished. Kess sat alone at a table designed for Orthvek, her breakfast tray looking comically small against the massive surface. She ate methodically, proteins, complex carbohydrates, hydration, fuel for the machine. Around her, clusters of students huddled in their species groups, occasionally glancing her way with expressions ranging from pity to savage anticipation. "I almost feel bad for her," murmured Afexmora to his companion, mandibles clicking softly. "Almost." "She chose this," his friend replied. "Stupidity should hurt. It's educational." Huxmal approached with his own tray, hesitated, then sat down across from Kess. The action drew stares. Openly associating with the soon-to-be humiliated human wasn't exactly a strategic social move. "You don't have to sit here," Kess said without looking up from her meal. "I won't be offended." "I'm your assigned roommate," Huxmal rumbled. "Seemed appropriate." "How noble." "That's not—" He stopped, his tail curling in frustration. "Look, human Kess, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but Lokthar is going to hurt you. Badly. There's no shame in withdrawing. You could claim illness, injury, anything. No one would blame you." Now Kess did look up, and there was that smile again. "I would." "You would what?" "Blame me. I didn't come here to quit before I even started." Huxmal's scales rippled in what his species used to express confusion, mixed with grudging respect. "You're insane." "Probably," Kess agreed cheerfully. Pass the protein paste? The entrance to the cafeteria exploded inward. Not literally, though with Lokthar, literal wasn't completely off the table. The prince strode in with an entourage of sycophants, his movements deliberate, calculated to draw every eye in the room. And it worked, because Lokthar understood spectacle the way humans understood breathing. He made a show of scanning the cafeteria, his gaze sweeping across tables until it landed on Kess. Then he smiled, all teeth, nothing friendly about it. "Human!" his voice boomed across the space. "Still here? I'm impressed. Most prey species would have fled during the night." The cafeteria went silent. Even the automated food dispensers seemed to pause. Kess took another bite of her breakfast, chewed, swallowed. Then, with deliberate casualness, she raised her hand in a small wave. Lokthar's entourage tensed. This wasn't the reaction they'd expected. Fear? Yes. Defiance? Sure, briefly, before reality set in. But this casual, almost bored acknowledgement? "You seem confident," Lokthar continued, stalking toward her table. The crowd parted like water. "Tell me, human, have you ever actually been in combat? Real combat, not whatever soft training your species pretends is preparation?" Kess set down her utensil. "Define real combat." "Life and death, blood and bone, the kind where losers don't get second chances." "Oh," Kess said, nodding slowly. "That kind. Yeah, I've done some of that." Lokthar laughed, and half the cafeteria laughed with him. Human military conflicts barely qualify as skirmishes by galactic standards. You fought other humans, same size, same limitations. Here, he spread his arms wide. Here you face species that evolved on high-gravity worlds, with natural weapons your kind can't match. This isn't your little playground anymore. "You make excellent points," Kess said, her tone so reasonable it was almost mocking. "I'm definitely outmatched physically. Slower, weaker, smaller. You've got me on every metric." Lokthar's smile widened. Finally, acknowledgement of reality. "Which is why," Kess continued, "when I beat you, it's going to be really, really embarrassing for you." The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop, if pins made any sound dropping in the first place, which they don't. But you get the idea. Lokthar's expression flickered through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, rage, amusement, more rage. "When you beat me? Noon cycle, right? I'll try not to damage you too badly. You've got a pretty face for a reptile." The prince's roar shook the rafters. "I'm going to enjoy this so much, human. I'll make it last. Every second, every bone, every—" Yeah, Kess interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Big talk, lots of threats, very intimidating. You done? Some of us are trying to eat." Huxmel had stopped breathing. He was fairly certain of this because his vision was starting to blur, and oxygen deprivation seemed like the only rational explanation for what he was witnessing. Lokthar leaned down, bringing his massive head inches from Kess's face. "Noon cycle, combat ring 1. I'm going to break you." "Looking forward to it," Kess replied, and popped another bite of food into her mouth. The prince stormed out, his entourage scrambling to follow, and the cafeteria erupted into chaos. Bets were being modified. Odds were shifting. Most students figured Kess had just signed her own death warrant, but a very few, wondered if maybe, just maybe, the human knew something they didn't. The janitor, monitoring the betting pools on his device, placed another wager. Combat Ring 1 was an architectural masterpiece, designed by species who believed that if you're going to fight, you should do it somewhere impressive. The circular platform stretched 30 meters across, surrounded by energy barriers that shimmered like heat waves. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles, and every single seat was filled. News had spread. This wasn't just any first combat trial, this was entertainment. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Commentators, yes, the Institute had commentators, because warriors appreciated good narration, were already warming up their analysis. In my 15 rotations covering combat trials, one commentator chittered into the broadcast system, his Fexmora accent thick even through translation. "I have never seen such a mismatch. The human Kess weighs approximately 60 kilograms. Prince Lokthar weighs over 380. "It's going to be a massacre," his co-commentator agreed, a female Orthvek, whose voice chimed like bells. "The only question is whether it'll be quick or prolonged." In the preparation chambers beneath the arena, Kess went through her pre-fight routine with the kind of methodical calm that either indicated mental preparation or complete disassociation from reality. Light stretching, joint rotations, breathing exercises that were old when her grandfather's grandfather was young. Across the arena, in a much larger preparation chamber, Lokthar was putting on a show. Roaring, striking practice dummies hard enough to crack their reinforced frames. His pre-combat ritual involved demonstrating exactly how outmatched his opponent was, and he played to the cameras that broadcast to the waiting crowd. "The human thinks size doesn't matter," he growled into the nearest camera. "She's about to learn why the Ulketh conquered 6 systems while her species was still figuring out interstellar travel." In the stands, Huxmal sat between a cluster of other Ulketh students who were eagerly discussing the upcoming fight. He kept his thoughts to himself, but his tail wouldn't stop twitching. "You actually spoke with the human?" one of his peers asked. "We're roommates." "Is she insane? Suicidal?" Huxmal thought about that smile. "I honestly don't know." Master Instructor Fenkor settled into the instructor's observation box, his compound eyes tracking every detail of the arena simultaneously. Beside him, other instructors murmured amongst themselves. "This is cruel," one said. "We should stop it." "She accepted the challenge," Fenkor replied, "and the prince accepted her acceptance. By Institute law, the match proceeds. She's going to get killed. Perhaps. Or perhaps we're about to learn something." Fenkor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Humans are new to the galactic stage. We know very little about their combat capabilities. Consider this educational research." The referee, a Morthpex whose species had evolved specifically to be neutral in all conflicts, entered the ring. Its crystalline form refracted light into patterns that signified official capacity. "Combatants, enter the ring." Lokthar emerged first, and the crowd went wild. He raised his arms, roared, slammed his tail into the platform hard enough to crack it. 380 kilograms of muscle, scale, and absolute confidence. Then Kess walked out, and the noise shifted. Not quite laughter, they'd done that already, but something else. Pity, maybe, or the kind of horrified fascination that comes from watching something terrible about to happen. She looked so small, so impossibly, ridiculously small. Kess rolled her shoulders once, twice, cracked her neck to one side, then the other, looked up at Lokthar and smiled. That smile. "Combatants," the referee's voice resonated through the arena. "The rules are simple. Fight until one yields, falls unconscious, or exits the ring. Lethal force is permitted, but not encouraged. Medical teams stand ready. Do you both understand?" "Understood," Lokthar rumbled. "Crystal clear," Kess said. "Then take your positions." They moved to opposite sides of the ring. Lokthar settled into a combat stance that had been perfected over generations of Olketh warriors. Low center of gravity, tail coiled for striking, claws extended. Kess stood normally, hands at her sides, weight balanced, looking for all the world like she was waiting for a bus, not about to fight a prince who'd killed trained warriors for sport. The energy barrier hummed to full power, sealing the ring. The crowd held its collective breath. "Begin!" The referee's voice cracked like thunder. And that's when everything changed. Lokthar charged. 380 kilograms of predatory evolution launched forward with the kind of speed that shouldn't have been possible for something that massive. The platform trembled. His roar shook the energy barriers. Every muscle, every scale, every ounce of his considerable mass focused on one goal, crushing the tiny human before she could even blink. Kess didn't move. Not a flinch, not a step, nothing. The crowd gasped. Huxmal's claws dug into his seat. The commentators stammered something about shock, paralysis, prey-freeze response. And then, at the last possible microsecond, Kess shifted her weight. Just slightly. Just enough. Lokthar's fist, capable of punching through reinforced steel, carved through empty air, where Kess's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The displacement of air from the missed strike ruffled her hair. She was already somewhere else. The prince's momentum carried him forward 3 steps before he could stop. Wheels around, confusion flickering across his features. That wasn't possible. Humans were slow. Everyone knew humans were slow. Their reflexes were... He swung again. A backhand that could decapitate. Kess wasn't there. Again. A low sweep with his tail. Perfect technique. Unavoidable. Except Kess stepped over it like she was avoiding a puddle. The arena had gone completely silent. Not the anticipatory silence from before. This was different. This was 3,000 warriors collectively realizing that something was very, very wrong with their understanding of the situation. "Is she?" the Fexmora commentator started. "She's faster," his Orthvek partner finished, disbelief chiming through every word. "How is she faster? Humans aren't supposed to be..." Lokthar attacked again, and again, and again. Each strike faster than the last, each one powered by growing frustration and genuine confusion. He was faster than 98% of species in known space. He'd trained since he could walk. His family's combat techniques were legendary. He couldn't touch her. Worse, and this was starting to dawn on him with the kind of creeping horror usually reserved for finding out your ship's life support is malfunctioning. She wasn't just dodging randomly. She was reading him. Every telegraph, every muscle twitch, every micro-adjustment in his stance that preceded an attack. Kess moved like water, like smoke, like she existed in the spaces between his attacks and simply flowed around them. "Okay," Kess said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent arena. "My turn." She moved forward, finally, offensively, and Lokthar swung to intercept. Big mistake. Kess's palm strike caught his elbow mid-swing, and the sound that echoed through Combat Ring 1 wasn't the meaty thud of flesh on scale. It was the distinct crack of bone fracturing. Lokthar's roar of pain was genuine this time. No performance, no show. Pure, shocked agony as his arm bent at an angle elbows definitely weren't designed for. He stumbled back, cradling the limb, his brain trying to process how something so small had hit something so hard. The crowd exploded into noise, shouts, clicks, chimes. The betting pools went absolutely insane as students frantically tried to modify wagers that suddenly seemed very, very poorly calculated. Pennicor leaned forward in the instructor's box, all four eyes locked on the human. "Fascinating," he murmured. Lochthar, to his credit, and he had very little credit left at this point, didn't yield. Pride wouldn't let him. Rage wouldn't let him. The fact that his entire identity was built on being an apex predator definitely wouldn't let him. He attacked with his good arm, relying on pure strength now, technique abandoned in favor of overwhelming force. Kess went to work, and it was work. Clinical, methodical, almost surgical in its precision. She targeted joints, pressure points, nerve clusters that the Olketh didn't even realize were vulnerable until they stopped functioning. Every strike had purpose. Every movement was economy incarnate. Lochthar tried to grab her, thinking if he could just get his hands on her, his superior strength would end this nightmare. Kess let him commit to the grab, then used his own momentum, added a pivot that looked simple but involved physics that would take 3 textbooks to explain, and suddenly the prince was airborne. The crash when he hit the platform registered on seismic sensors 3 levels down. "That's impossible," Huxamal whispered, his claws now fully embedded in his seat's armrests. "He weighs 6 times what she does. That's not. Physics doesn't." But physics did, apparently, when you understood leverage and momentum and had the timing of someone who'd spent their entire life learning to make physics their personal weapon. Lochthar pushed himself up, slower now, his movements telegraphing pain in a dozen different ways. His right arm hung useless. His left knee was compromised. Kess had hit it at an angle that hyperextended something important. His tail twitched erratically, nerve damage from a strike to its base. The fight had lasted maybe 90 seconds. It felt like hours. "You're good," Kess said, and she sounded genuinely complimentary. "Really good, actually. On pure strength and speed, you've got most species beat. But here's the thing about humans." She moved, and this time the crowd saw it. Saw her at something approaching full speed. It was a blur. Even the slow-motion replay system struggled to capture it clearly. We had to learn to fight things bigger than us, stronger than us. We spent our entire evolutionary history as not the apex predator. So we got creative. Lochthar tried one last attack. Desperate, injured, but still dangerous. His species' most devastating technique. A leaping strike that concentrated all his mass into a single point. Warriors had died from this move. Armor had shattered. Kess waited, timed it. As Lochthar descended, all that mass and velocity turned into a weapon. Kess did 3 things simultaneously. She stepped inside his range, closer, not away, which violated every survival instinct his prey brain insisted was correct. She redirected his momentum with her hands, a push that added to his rotation rather than opposing it. And she struck, one perfect palm strike to his center mass that had every ounce of her body weight behind it, every muscle fiber contributing, the kind of strike that martial artists spent lifetimes perfecting. Physics took over from there. Lochthar crashed into the platform with enough force to crack the reinforced surface in a spiderweb pattern radiating outward from the impact point. The sound was like a starship dropping from orbit. He didn't move. Medical teams rushed in immediately, scanners already out, checking vitals. Alive, definitely alive, thank the various deities of a dozen species, but thoroughly, completely, absolutely unconscious. Kess stood in the center of the ring, breathing slightly harder now, not even winded really, just elevated heart rate from the exertion. The arena was silent. Then, from somewhere in the back, probably the janitor, who'd just won enough credits to retire early, someone started clapping. Slowly, like they weren't quite sure this was real. Then another joined, and another. Within seconds, Combat Ring 1 erupted into applause. Not the mocking laughter from before, not pity. This was genuine, awed appreciation for what they'd just witnessed. Kess looked around at the thousands of faces, shocked, amazed, some still processing what their eyes had clearly shown them, but their brains refused to accept. She smiled that same smile, the one that had been unnerving everyone since yesterday. Except now they understood what it meant. It meant I knew exactly how this was going to end. The referee, its crystalline form still refracting light, but somehow seeming stunned despite having no facial features, managed to announce, "Winner, Human Kess." The medical team confirmed Lokthar would survive. Fractured bones, hyperextended joints, severe bruising, and a concussion that would keep him seeing double for a week, but nothing permanent. They loaded him onto an anti-grav stretcher and began moving him toward the medical wing. Kess walked to the edge of the platform, looked up at the instructor's box where Fencor sat, and asked in a voice that carried perfectly across the arena's sound system, "Next?" The explosion of noise that followed Kess's question was unlike anything Combat Ring 1 had ever witnessed. Warriors didn't just cheer. They roared, clicked, chimed, and produced sounds that translation devices gave up trying to interpret. The betting pools had gone from organized chaos to complete meltdown. Credits were changing hands so fast, the Institute's financial systems flagged it as potential fraud. In the medical wing, Lokthar regained consciousness to find himself surrounded by scanning equipment and very concerned-looking medical personnel. His first words, slurred through painkillers and a swollen jaw, were, "What hit me?" "A human," the doctor replied, which really wasn't helpful, but was technically accurate. "No, I mean, what kind of vehicle?" "A human. 60 kilograms. 5'4". Human Kess." Lokthar's eyes, both of them currently pointing in slightly different directions thanks to the concussion, tried to focus. "That's not possible." The doctor pulled up the fight footage on a holographic display. "Watch!" And Lokthar watched himself get systematically dismantled by someone a sixth his weight. Watched the precision, the control, the absolute mastery of biomechanics and leverage. Watched himself get thrown, struck, redirected, and ultimately knocked unconscious by techniques he'd never even conceived of. Something happened to Lokthar in that moment. Something that doesn't happen often to princes who've spent their lives being told they're superior by virtue of birth and species. He experienced humility. It felt weird. He didn't like it, but he couldn't deny it. "Play that last sequence again," he said quietly. The doctor complied. Lokthar watched Kess redirect his most powerful attack like she was guiding water. "She didn't just beat me," he murmured, his voice lacking all its earlier arrogance. "She gave me a lesson. Every strike was teaching me where I was vulnerable." "Your analysis is likely impaired by head trauma," the doctor suggested helpfully. "No," Lokthar said, something shifting behind his eyes. "No, I'm seeing clearly for the first time since this started." Back in the arena, the instant replay systems were working overtime. Students crowded around holographic displays, watching the fight from multiple angles, slowing it down, speeding it up, analyzing every microsecond. "There," a Fexmora student paused the footage, pointing with one of his multiple limbs. "See how she shifts her weight 0.3 seconds before Lokthar commits to the strike? She's not reacting. She's anticipating." "Impossible," another student protested. "Predictive combat analysis requires processing speeds beyond organic capability." "Unless," Huxmal's voice cut through the discussion, his tone thoughtful, unless you've fought enough opponents with similar patterns that recognition becomes instinctive. Pattern matching, not prediction. All eyes turned to him. Our roommate just defeated a prince, Huxmal continued, his tail swishing in what his species used to express reassessment of reality. Maybe we should stop saying what humans can't do and start learning what they can. The crowd around the display murmured agreement, and Huxmal realized with some surprise that he'd just defended the same human he'd mocked yesterday. Growth, apparently, happened fast when it was accompanied by watching your foundational assumptions get thrown across a combat ring. The commentators were having their own crisis of understanding. In 15 rotations, the Fexmora announcer was saying, his mandibles clicking rapidly, "I have never seen anything like this. The human didn't just win, she controlled every aspect of that fight." "Look at this angle," his Orthvec partner chimed, pulling up another replay. When Lokthar attempts the grab at the 80-second mark, Kess is already moving to counter before his hands are fully extended. She's operating 3 moves ahead. This changes everything we understand about human combat capability. This changes everything we understand about combat. Period. Size advantage, strength advantage, speed advantage. She negated all of them with technique alone. The broadcast was going out across multiple systems. By evening, the fight would be viral. By tomorrow, every military academy in the galaxy would be analyzing it. By next week, human combat instructors would be fielding offers from a dozen different species. But right now, in this moment, Kess was the most interesting person in known space. Galactic news feeds picked up the story within the hour. Unknown human defeats. Elite warrior in under 3 minutes scrolled across information networks from the core worlds to the outer rim. Footage of the final strike, Lokthar crashing into the platform like a meteor, became the most shared video clip in the galaxy's data networks. Military analysts scrambled to reassess human threat levels. Diplomatic corps frantically updated their briefings on Earth. And somewhere in the human embassy on the capital world, a cultural attaché watched the footage and thought, "Oh, this is going to complicate trade negotiations." On the orbital stations circling Ixmarath, merchant vessels preparing for departure found their passenger manifests suddenly updated. Reporters from a dozen news networks were booking emergency transport to the Institute, all demanding credentials for the next combat trials. The Institute's communications office, typically staffed by one board administrator, now fielded over 300 requests for interviews, access, and exclusive footage rights. One particularly ambitious Fexmora producer offered 500,000 credits for exclusive rights to follow Kess through the rest of the tournament season. The Institute declined, but the offer itself became news, which generated more news, which spawned analysis pieces about human market value in the entertainment sector. Financial markets reacted too. Stock in human-owned security firms jumped 18% in the first hour after the footage went public. Insurance companies specializing in interspecies conflict resolution began frantically recalculating their risk assessment models. One economic analyst published a brief report titled "Reconsidering the Human Variable" that would become required reading in business schools across 5 systems. The galaxy, it seemed, was paying attention. Kess's quarters, which she'd occupied alone since arrival, suddenly became the most popular destination in the entire institute. Students lined up in the hallway. Yes, actual warriors who'd conquered planets were lining up, hoping for a chance to speak with her, train with her, learn from her. Huxmal, having returned from the arena, found himself playing bouncer at his own door. "She needs rest," he told a cluster of Orthvec students for the 3rd time. "We just want to ask about the pivot technique in the 60-second mark. Rest. She needs rest. come back tomorrow. But tomorrow. Inside, Kess was sitting on her bunk, reviewing the fight footage on her personal device. Not admiring her victory, analyzing mistakes, spots where she'd been inefficient, moments where better positioning would have ended it faster. "They're not going to leave," Huxmal said, closing the door behind him. "I noticed. You're famous, across the galaxy, right now." "That wasn't really the plan," Kess said, not looking up from the footage. "I just wanted to pass the first trial." Huxmal's tail curled in amusement. "By devastating one of the Institute's most decorated students?" "Devastated is a strong word. He'll heal. Probably learned something." "You're different than I thought," Huxmal admitted, settling onto his own bunk, designed for someone his size, which meant it creaked ominously even under normal use. "Yesterday I thought you were either insane or stupid. Today, still could be both," Kess interrupted with a grin. "Today, I think maybe humans have been underestimated by everyone for a very long time." "We're good at being underestimated," Kess said. "Comes with the territory when you're not the biggest, fastest, or strongest. You learn to make those things not matter." A chime at the door interrupted them. Huxmal's expression suggested he was about to send away another hopeful student, but the voice that came through the comm system stopped him. "Human Kess, this is Master Instructor Fencor. I would speak with you." Kess and Huxmal exchanged glances. You didn't keep Master Instructors waiting. Not if you valued your enrollment status. The door opened, and Fencor entered with that peculiar grace that came from having 6 legs and absolute confidence in every single one. His compound eyes tracked both students, then settled on Kess. "Walk with me," he said. Not a request. They walked, Fencor, Kess, and Huxmal, who followed because technically this was his room too, and nobody had told him to stay behind. The Institute's corridors were less crowded now, most students having retreated to their quarters or training halls to process the day's events. Fencor led them to his office, a space decorated with weapons from 100 different worlds and trophies from 500 battles. He settled into a seat designed for his physiology and gestured for Kess to sit. "You were never supposed to be admitted to this institute," he said without preamble. Kess raised an eyebrow, starting to notice that. "Not because of size or species, because you shouldn't have qualified. Humans are too new to galactic society. No established combat record. No documented fighting traditions that our assessment systems could evaluate." His mandibles clicked in a pattern that suggested amusement. "And yet, here you are. Here you were. Someone pushed your application through channels that normally require 3 levels of military verification. You know who? A human observer, name classified. But their recommendation was emphatic. They insisted that you specifically be given a chance." Fencor pulled up a holographic display showing Kess's application file. "Do you know why?" "No idea," Kess admitted. "Because, and I'm quoting here, the galaxy needs to understand what happens when humans fight." Those were the exact words. Huxmal shifted his weight, scales rippling. "You knew she could do this. Before today." "I suspected," Fencor corrected. "Suspicion and knowledge are different things. Now I know." He turned all 4 eyes on Kess. "Why did you let everyone mock you? Yesterday, in the orientation hall, you could have demonstrated your capabilities, could have demanded respect from the start." Kess smiled. That smile again, the one that finally made sense to everyone who saw it. "Because warriors who rely only on size and strength needed to see the truth. They needed to believe I was weak, helpless, outmatched. They needed to watch those advantages get negated by technique and precision. Otherwise, it's just theory, just words. You taught an entire generation in one fight, Fencor said, his tone carrying something that might have been approval. That was the idea. The betting odds on you have shifted, Fencor continued. You're now favored to win the entire seasonal tournament, every match, against species that have been warriors for millennia. No pressure, then? Kess said lightly. Fencor's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement now. The Institute's purpose isn't just creating warriors. It's discovering new combat philosophies, new approaches to conflict. For 300 rotations, we've taught the same techniques, the same principles. Strength, speed, size. You've demonstrated something we forgot. Which is that evolution doesn't care about fair fights. It cares about survival. And humans survived by making fair fights irrelevant. He stood, a gesture of respect in his species. Welcome to the Institute, human Kess. Officially this time. Something tells me we'll be learning as much from you as you'll learn from us. After Fencor dismissed them, Kess and Huxmal walked back through corridors that had gone from hostile to curious in the span of a single afternoon. What now? Huxmal asked. Now? Kess stretched, joints popping. Now I train. Rest. Prepare for the next trial. Same as everyone else. You're not worried about the attention? The pressure? Huxmal, Kess said, stopping to look up at her massive roommate. I just fought a prince in front of 3,000 warriors and knocked him out in under 3 minutes. Pressure is relative. They rounded a corner to find their hallway packed with students. But this time, instead of mockery or pity, faces showed something else entirely. Respect, curiosity, and, most surprising, hope. Because if a human could do this, if someone so small could be so effective, maybe their own limitations weren't as limiting as they'd thought. Kess waded through the crowd, fielding questions, promising to demonstrate techniques tomorrow, agreeing to training sessions that would probably fill her schedule for the next 6 months. The underdog had become the teacher. The prey species had become the professor. And the galaxy, the vast, ancient, complicated galaxy that thought it understood combat, was about to learn that when you spend your entire evolutionary history fighting above your weight class just to survive, you get really, really good at it. Somewhere in the medical wing, Lokthar watched the fight footage for the 20th time and smiled despite his fractured jaw. He had a lot to learn. They all did. And for the first time in his privileged, arrogant life, Lokthar was genuinely looking forward to being a student.